She signed the divorce papers in tears at a Christmas party. What no one knew about her changed everything. She smiled through the tears. That night, a secret was about to be revealed. One that would shatter lives and change everything. If you think you've seen betrayal before, you haven't seen anything yet. If you've ever been blindsided and betrayed by someone you love, you'll want to hear this story. The Christmas party was designed to impress. Every detail screamed wealth trying to look effortless. Chandeliers glowed warm gold. Crystal glasses chimed softly. A string quartet played songs nobody listened to, but everyone pretended to enjoy. The Hallberg family believed this was what power looked like. She stood just outside the circle of laughter, smiling the way you smile when disappearing feels safer than being noticed. The beautiful Serafina Hale had learned that skill early. How to fold herself smaller. How to stay pleasant. How to exist without taking up space. It was survival, not weakness, though no one here cared enough to tell the difference. Adrian Hallberg stood beside her, immaculate in his tailored suit, every inch the man his family had raised him to be. Confident, polished, detached. His hand rested lightly at her back, more a reminder of ownership than affection. He barely looked at her all evening. Around them, the Hallbergs moved like royalty in their own kingdom. Leonard Hallberg commanded conversations with practiced authority. His wife Celeste glided through the room, smiling sharply, assessing everyone like inventory. Their friends laughed too loudly, drank too much, and spoke in coded compliments that doubled as insults. Serafina didn't belong to this world. They had made sure she knew it. She had married into the family quietly, without spectacle. No powerful parents to boast about. No impressive lineage to parade. Just a woman with a soft voice and a past she didn't talk about. The family had filled in the blanks themselves, and none of the conclusions were kind. Orphan. Charity case. Temporary mistake. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she approached. In the way Celeste, her mother-in-law, corrected her posture with a touch that lingered too long. In the way Adrian spoke about our future, without ever including her. Still, she stayed. Still, she hoped. Because when you grow up without roots, you cling to anything that looks like permanence. The party reached its peak just after dinner. Dessert plates cleared. Champagne refreshed. Leonard, her father-in-law, tapped his glass, commanding attention. The room quieted. Obedient. Family, he said warmly. Friends. What a year it's been. Applause followed. Serafina felt Adrian's hand leave her back. That was when Celeste approached. She carried a pale envelope. Simple. Elegant. Heavy. Serafina noticed the weight of it before she understood why. Celeste smiled, her lips perfectly painted, her eyes sharp and unblinking. She placed the envelope gently in Serafina's hands, as if offering a gift. Merry Christmas, she said. The room leaned in without realizing it. Curiosity is contagious. Serafina opened the envelope slowly. Her fingers trembled, though she didn't know why yet. The words swam before settling into focus. Divorce papers. Her breath left her lungs in one quiet, humiliating rush. Adrian didn't stop it. He didn't protest. He didn't even look surprised. He simply stepped back, creating space, like the decision had already been made without her. The silence was unbearable. This isn't the place, Serafina whispered, her voice barely holding together. Celeste tilted her head. It's the perfect place. Family should witness important decisions. Laughter rippled. Uncomfortable. Curious. Cruel. Adrian finally spoke. Sign them, he said flatly. Let's not make a scene. Her vision blurred. Heat crawled up her neck. Every instinct screamed to run, but years of conditioning kept her rooted in place. She looked around the room. At the faces watching her unravel. At the people who had never learned her favorite color, never asked about her childhood, never saw her as anything but disposable. Her hands shook as she signed. Applause followed. Not loud, polite, devastating. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded bill. He pressed it into her palm with a smirk. "For the road," he said. "Charity." Something inside her cracked quietly. Security escorted her out moments later. Not roughly, just efficiently. Snow bit at her skin as the doors closed behind her, sealing warmth, laughter, and her marriage on the other side. She stood alone in the cold, divorce papers in hand, breath fogging the night air. She had nothing left. Or so everyone believed. As Serafina walked away from the mansion, unaware eyes watched from afar. Pieces long separated were shifting back into alignment. A truth buried decades ago was beginning to surface. And the life they thought they'd destroyed was only just beginning. The cold bit through Serafina's coat, but it barely registered. Her mind was still replaying the image of the Christmas party. The laughter, the glare of Celeste Hallberg, the divorce papers pressed into her trembling hands. Every step away from the mansion felt like leaving pieces of herself behind. Yet something inside whispered that this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. A sleek black car pulled up quietly, unnoticed by passers-by. The window slid down, revealing Patricia, a woman who had been her mother's trusted aide. Patricia's eyes were sharp, urgent, but not unkind. "You're coming with me," she said. There was no time for questions. Only the choice between staying crushed or moving forward. Inside the car, the world outside blurred into snow and streetlights. Patricia spoke only when necessary, her words precise. She mentioned Elias Rothenberg, Serafina's father, a man she had been told was dead or irrelevant. She hesitated. Could this be true? Was everything she'd believed about her life a lie? By the time they arrived at the sprawling estate, her doubts dissolved under the sheer immensity of the place. Nothing about this world felt like her past. Every detail, the manicured gardens, the private wings of the mansion, spoke of power, legacy, and secrets that had been hidden from her for too long. Patricia guided her to a quiet room and finally revealed the truth. She was the daughter of Elias Rothenberg, erased from records, hidden for her protection, and now, at 26, ready to reclaim her life. Serafina felt a mix of rage, grief, and disbelief. The past 2 decades of humiliation, of being dismissed as disposable, flashed before her eyes. But there was no time to dwell. Marcus Rothenberg, her father's younger brother, had been running the company in secret. He was corrupt, dangerous, and ruthless. Any sudden move could place her in peril. She needed a plan, patience, and allies she barely knew she had. Patricia outlined the path. Remain hidden. Learn the company. Build knowledge, strategy, and power. Gather evidence. Then, only then, would justice be possible. Serafina sat back, the cold light of the estate streaming through the windows. She realized that everything she had endured had led her to this exact moment. Every humiliation, every betrayal, every stolen dollar, it had been preparation. And as she pondered the life she was about to step into, she remembered something almost comical in its irony. The people who had humiliated her, mocked her, and dismissed her, they had no idea how dangerous she would become. At that moment, a thought flickered across her mind, one she knew her audience would understand if they were watching. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or forced to the sidelines, hit that like button. It's more than support, it's proof that your story matters. And don't forget to subscribe. Stories like this don't tell themselves. Comment below and let me know where you're watching from, because no matter where you are, everyone deserves their moment of truth. Serafina closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of her new reality settle. A spark ignited inside her. She would not be a victim. Not anymore. The first steps of transformation were complete. The rest, the power, the strategy, the revenge, was waiting. And it would be precise, unstoppable, and inevitable. The estate's gates closed behind Serafina with a soft but definitive click. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of polished wood and old money, a scent she hadn't known she could inherit. Every step echoed like a drumbeat: anticipation, dread, hope. Patricia guided her without explanation, her hands firm but gentle, as if she understood the storm brewing inside the young woman beside her. They entered a sunlit room, quiet except for the faint hiss of an oxygen machine. There he sat, Elias Rothenberg, frail, pale, yet unmistakably commanding in presence. His hands rested on the arms of a wheelchair, veins like roots showing through delicate skin. Serafina froze. There was something familiar in the set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes, the faint curve of his lips. When he looked at her, it was like recognition tore through decades of absence. His gaze softened, moisture welling, trembling fingers reaching toward her as if to bridge the lost years. "Elena," he whispered, her mother's name trembling through his voice. "You look just like her." Serafina's knees weakened. She fell into his hands, tears escaping the control she had practiced for years. The weight of everything, the humiliations, the stolen years, the falsehoods, crashed down in a torrent of grief and disbelief. He held her tightly, the air heavy with the kind of raw emotion that words cannot carry. Elias told her everything. Her mother's brilliance, the love that had been lost to tragedy, the painstaking attempts to protect her from a family that had betrayed them both. The legal manipulations that erased her from existence. The decades he had spent searching, the countless nights haunted by a daughter he thought was gone forever. Serafina listened, numb and alive at once. Rage bubbled beneath the grief. The world that had humiliated her suddenly seemed fragile, temporary, weak. Every slight, every insult she had endured, every stolen dollar, every sneer, it all had context now. She wasn't nothing. She was everything they had ignored. Then Patricia dropped the second revelation. Marcus Rothenberg, her uncle, had run the company for years, assuming there was no heir. He was corrupt, dangerous, untouchable in his arrogance. Revealing herself too early could put her life at risk. Everything depended on patience, strategy, and secrecy. For the first time in her life, Serafina realized that survival alone wasn't enough. She needed mastery, knowledge, power, and she would take it step by step. She turned to her father and nodded, a silent promise. She would reclaim what was hers, protect the legacy stolen from her, and correct the injustices inflicted on her. The path was clear, though perilous, and every wrong would be measured, precise, and unforgettable. The room fell silent, the weight of possibility pressing against the walls. Outside, the wind howled across the estate. Inside, a daughter once lost had been found, and a force for reckoning had begun to awaken. Serafina has discovered the truth about her identity, her father, and the danger posed by her uncle. The next step, training, strategy, and transformation, will begin, and nothing will ever be the same. The first morning of her new life felt like walking through a fog. The estate was quiet, the sun slanting through tall windows, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into the past she could never forget. Serafina stood by the grand staircase, the divorce papers and every insult still raw in her mind, but something had shifted. She was no longer just a victim. She was a force waiting to take shape. Patricia introduced her to the private tutors, experts in finance, law, corporate strategy, and etiquette. Each lesson was grueling, designed to rebuild her mind, sharpen her instincts, and teach her the unspoken rules of wealth and power. Numbers that once confused her now danced clearly on the page. Legal documents that would have intimidated her became instruments of control. Every lesson reinforced the fact that knowledge was her weapon, patience her shield. She studied Rothenberg Holdings inside and out, memorizing corporate structures, subsidiaries, and financial flows. The more she learned, the more she realized how much had been stolen from her. Not just wealth, but opportunity, autonomy, and dignity. Marcus Rothenberg had ruled the company like a tyrant, blind to ethics, greedy beyond measure, assuming no one could challenge him. He had underestimated her. He would regret it. At night, she practiced her new persona. Elise Moreau, European investor. Aloof, confident, mysterious. Her hair was reshaped, her posture perfected, her walk measured. She studied body language in mirrors, learned how to project authority with a glance, a pause, a tilt of her head. Every movement was deliberate. She became someone unrecognizable, someone the Hallbergs could never link to the girl they had mocked in the snow. Meanwhile, investigators delved into her ex-husband Adrian Hallberg and his family. Every secret, every misdeed, every small act of cruelty was unearthed. Debts hidden under layers of false documents, fraudulent contracts, gambling losses, blackmail, and corruption, all carefully documented. Serafina absorbed it all. The picture of her enemy's vulnerabilities became clearer with each report. She didn't feel anger. She felt focus, precision, control. Days became nights, and nights blurred into weeks. Every training session, every strategy discussion, every intelligence report transformed her. She grew sharper, stronger, more determined. The girl who had signed divorce papers in tears was disappearing. In her place was Elise Moreau, calculated, untouchable, ready. And yet, beneath the confidence, beneath the persona, Serafina never forgot her true name. Every lesson, every tactic, every preparation was not for vanity, it was for reclamation. She would step into the world of the Hallbergs and Rothenbergs not as a victim, not as a charity case, but as the rightful heir, the architect of justice, and the storm they would never see coming. By the end of the 6th month, she was ready. Knowledge, strategy, and meticulous planning had turned into something unstoppable. Her enemies remained oblivious. They would not recognize the threat until it was too late. And in that quiet certainty, Serafina smiled once. For the first time in years, she felt the intoxicating clarity of power, the knowledge that humiliation was temporary, but justice, once executed, could be permanent. Serafina is fully transformed, armed with knowledge, strategy, and the persona of Elise Moreau. The next steps, entering the Hallbergs' world, testing their weaknesses, and planting the seeds of her revenge, are imminent. Serafina's world had narrowed to one purpose: knowledge. Every paper, every file, every whispered rumor from investigators became a thread in a vast tapestry of truth. The Hallbergs and Rothenbergs had assumed she was powerless. They had been wrong. Every slight, every debt forged, every humiliation, she catalogued it all with meticulous care. The investigators' reports arrived daily. Adrian Hallberg's failing businesses, hidden debts, and fraudulent schemes were documented in black and white. Leonard Hallberg's shady real estate deals were flagged, Eleanor's gambling losses exposed, and Mara Hallberg's blackmail scandal revealed in painstaking detail. Every secret was a lever, and Serafina planned to pull each one with precision. She didn't let anger dictate her actions. It was focus that guided her, clarity that sharpened her mind. The girl who had cried in the snow had been replaced by a strategist, a woman whose every thought was measured, every step deliberate. She studied their weaknesses, memorized the patterns of their arrogance, and anticipated their next moves. By midweek, she had compiled a full dossier on her ex-husband Adrian. Every forged signature, every hidden loan, every stolen dollar was documented. The debt he had buried her under would soon return, but now the leverage was hers. The Hallbergs' empire had cracks, and she had the tools to exploit them with calculated precision. Meanwhile, Serafina began reaching out subtly to allies, legal experts, former employees, and board members who had grown disillusioned with Marcus Rothenberg's corruption. Each connection was small, quiet, unnoticed. Everyone a potential ally when the time came to strike. Even in moments of reflection, she allowed herself the rare satisfaction of imagining their reactions. Leonard's smugness, Adrian's false confidence, Celeste's condescending smile, all poised to crumble. She reminded herself that justice wasn't about cruelty. It was about balance, restoring what had been stolen, and ensuring the guilty could not escape consequence. And then, in the quiet moments, she remembered her audience. Every person watching her story unfold could relate, had felt underestimated, humiliated, or powerless. If you've ever been overlooked, betrayed, or dismissed, this is your moment of connection. Hit like if you've been there. Subscribe to follow the journey. It's more than a story. It's proof that no one can define your worth. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because no matter your location, your voice matters. The plan crystallized in her mind. She would enter the Hallbergs' world undetected, using her new identity to gather more information, test their weaknesses, and prepare for a public reveal. Every document, every secret, every vulnerability became part of her arsenal. Serafina's transformation was now complete in knowledge and strategy. The game was no longer survival. It was initiation. Her enemies would never see the storm coming, yet it was already gathering just beyond the horizon. Serafina is armed with evidence, connections, and strategy. The first infiltration into the Hallbergs' corporate world is imminent, and every move she makes now could trigger the collapse of her enemies' carefully constructed empires. The city skyline stretched out beneath her as Elise Moreau stepped out of the black sedan, tall heels clicking against the marble floor of the Hallbergs' corporate building. She wasn't Serafina Hale anymore. She was a European investor, mysterious, commanding, untouchable, and utterly unrecognizable. Inside, the boardroom hummed with quiet energy. Leonard Hallberg presided over the meeting, exuding authority, his mind occupied with profits and power, blind to the shadow entering his domain. Adrian glanced up, curiosity flickering for a moment, but he dismissed it as a routine meeting. No one suspected who she truly was. Elise introduced herself with calm confidence, her accent measured, her tone precise. The kind of confidence that disarmed yet intrigued. She asked questions about investments, corporate expansions, and partnership opportunities. Every answer was laced with insight, subtly exposing weaknesses she had already memorized. As the meeting progressed, small cracks began to show. Leonard fidgeted at a pointed question about an underperforming subsidiary. Eleanor tried to redirect the conversation when Elise highlighted discrepancies in a report. Adrian's jaw tightened. Something about her was familiar, yet he couldn't place it. Elise noted every reaction, every micro-expression, every pause. Each one was another piece of the puzzle. She planted subtle seeds of doubt, hints of oversight, making them question each other's competence without revealing her hand. Her presence alone began to shift the balance of power in the room. The day stretched on with strategic discussions, calculated proposals, and careful observations. Elise left the boardroom without any overt confrontation, but with a mental map of the Hallbergs' vulnerabilities. Every weakness, every misstep would later become a tool for justice. That evening, she walked through the corridors of the mansion, silent and observant. Every family interaction, every casual remark, was documented in her mind and in her dossier. She realized how fragile their empire truly was and how close they had come to destroying her life, oblivious that the threat had already walked into their halls. Patricia met her later in the estate library. "You've unsettled them," she said, a rare smile breaking her usually stoic demeanor. "But it's only the beginning. They don't know what's coming." Serafina allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The storm was approaching. She had tested their defenses, probed their arrogance, and walked among them unrecognized. Every word, every glance, every carefully measured gesture brought her closer to the inevitable confrontation. Dinner at the Hallberg mansion is scheduled tomorrow, an event where past and present collide. Elise Moreau will step into the home that once humiliated Serafina, setting the stage for revelations, manipulation, and the first tangible cracks in her enemy's armor. The invitation arrived without fanfare, discreet but impossible to ignore. Dinner at the Hallberg mansion. The same hall where Serafina had been humiliated, the same space where her tears had once gone unnoticed. Now, as Elise Moreau, she stepped through the grand doors with poise, elegance radiating from every movement. Her taupe cashmere dress hugged her figure, designer glasses reflecting the chandelier's glow. Unrecognizable. Unreachable. Inside, the room buzzed with polite laughter and forced smiles. Leonard Hallberg presided over the table, Eleanor flitting between guests like a sharp-eyed bird. Adrian sat across, smug yet subtly unsettled, a faint flicker of recognition he couldn't place. Serafina noticed every detail, the way the silverware gleamed, the way the Hallbergs' posture shifted under her gaze, the subtle tension behind their eyes. Dinner began with small talk, meaningless to most but rich with opportunity for Elise. She asked about investments, casually probed for details on past mergers, and inserted carefully measured comments about the company's finances. Every word was a test, every glance a probe. She recorded the subtext of every exchange mentally and through discreet notes. Then she asked about Adrian's previous marriage. Casual, curious, innocuous. The Hallbergs laughed dismissively, eager to belittle the subject, unaware that every word was being catalogued. Eleanor mocked her old wife's origins, dismissing her as orphaned, insignificant, disposable. Adrian's response, attempting to spin it as irrelevant, revealed his ignorance, his arrogance, and his unawareness of his own mistakes. Each revelation was a victory. The investigator's work combined with her own observations, forming an airtight chain of evidence. She understood the financial entanglements, personal betrayals, and vulnerabilities of everyone at the table. The Hallbergs, intoxicated by power and tradition, had underestimated her completely. Patricia's call during dessert jolted her. Elias Rothenberg, her father, had collapsed. Time was running out. The urgency of his condition crystallized her resolve. She could wait no longer. Every strategy she had rehearsed, every plan meticulously constructed, pointed to a single inevitable conclusion. The moment of truth was near. And for the audience watching, the tension mirrored their own experiences of injustice. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of cruelty, pause and imagine the satisfaction of turning the tables. Like this video if the feeling resonates, subscribe to see justice unfold, and comment below where you're watching from. Your story matters as much as hers. As the dinner ended, she stood gracefully, a silent promise in her eyes. Every word, every insult, every smug glance would be repaid with precision. She left the mansion with the knowledge that the final pieces were in place. The infiltration was complete. The evidence compiled. The stage was set. Serafina's father is in critical condition. Her enemies remain blind to her identity, and the final confrontation is imminent. Every move from this point will determine the collapse of the Hallbergs' empire and the reclamation of her legacy. The conference room at Rothenberg Global Industries was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, investors murmured. The Hallbergs arrived confident, curious, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Serafina, now fully Elise Moreau in appearance, walked in with calm authority, her burgundy-wool dress impeccable, every step deliberate, every gaze measured. She strode to the podium and let the room settle. Silence fell, punctuated only by the faint hum of anticipation. She paused, letting the tension thicken. Leonard's smug smile faltered. Adrian shifted uneasily. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Every micro-expression was catalogued in her mind, a silent tally of victory already forming. "My name is not Elise Moreau," she began, her voice steady, commanding, leaving no room for doubt. Cameras zoomed. The room leaned in. "I am Serafina Hale, heir to Rothenberg Global Industries and daughter of Elias Rothenberg." Shock froze the Hallbergs in place. Adrian's mouth opened, then closed. Leonard's hand twitched toward a glass he didn't drink. Eleanor's face drained of color. The revelation landed with the weight of inevitability. She unveiled evidence: fraudulent deals, embezzlement, forged signatures, hidden debts, and illegal contracts. Each accusation was precise, backed by indisputable documentation. Federal agents, previously unnoticed in the back of the room, stepped forward. Panic rippled through the Hallbergs as reality sank in. "You ridiculed me, dismissed me, and stole my life," she said, looking directly at Adrian. "Now, the debts, the property, and the consequences all belong to you." Leonard stammered, trying to regain control, but the room was already against him. Agents led him out. Eleanor screamed, helpless. Adrian's confidence crumbled. Every insult, every slight, every betrayal catalogued for decades, now confronted him in stark reality. Serafina's gaze softened briefly toward the room. "Justice is not cruelty," she said. "It is balance. And today, balance is restored." Cameras captured every moment, the public witnessing the fall of a family that had believed themselves untouchable. Then she received the final call. Her father had passed. Holding his hand until the end, she whispered a promise. His legacy and hers would be honored. She left the room not in vengeance, but in triumph, fully aware that her enemies had underestimated the quiet girl they once thought disposable. Outside, the city lights shone like witnesses. The storm had passed, leaving ruin for the guilty and power reclaimed for the rightful heir. Serafina has executed her public reveal, dismantled the Hallbergs' empire, and reclaimed her inheritance. Winter had settled over the city, blanketing streets and rooftops in soft white. Serafina stood by the window of her newly renovated office at Rothenberg Global Industries, looking down at the skyline she now owned, not just in assets, but in legacy, integrity, and purpose. The empire she had reclaimed was thriving, transparent, ethical. The empire she had once only dreamed of was finally hers. The Hallbergs were gone from her world. Leonard had been removed from every board position. Eleanor faced bankruptcy. Adrian worked at a modest gas station far from the life he had destroyed, and the rest of the family scattered, their power evaporated. The law had caught up to those who had betrayed her, and justice had been served with precision, not chaos. Serafina didn't feel triumph in cruelty, but in balance. She established scholarships for orphans, funded community projects, and invested in affordable housing. Every initiative was a tribute to her mother, her father, and the version of herself that had endured years of humiliation. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. Walking through her father's private garden, snow crunching softly beneath her boots, she paused at the graves of her parents. She placed fresh flowers on each headstone, letting the cold wind carry her whispered promise. "I was never nothing," she said. "I was always your daughter." The weight of the past had been lifted, replaced with clarity and power. Serafina had rebuilt herself from the ground up, not just as an heir, but as a woman who could command respect, wield influence, and inspire others who had once felt powerless. Every insult, every betrayal had been a step on the path to this moment. Turning to the camera, as if speaking to those who had followed her journey, she shared a quiet truth. The story wasn't just about her. It was about resilience, about reclaiming what was stolen, and about creating a life defined by integrity and purpose. And now, this community of viewers, those who had witnessed the journey, was part of something bigger. Something ongoing. If you've ever felt underestimated, dismissed, or powerless, you're not alone, she said softly. This is a space where stories like ours matter, where strength, strategy, and justice inspire us all. Join this community. Subscribe, turn on post notifications, and be part of the journey. Because together, we rise, we reclaim, and we create the lives we deserve. The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the city in quiet promise. Serafina smiled, the weight of the past replaced by purpose, and a future built on power, justice, and community.